Are you, as a landlord, aware of the procedure that needs to be taken to make sure that upon expiry of your tenancy contract, your tenant will leave your property? In this episode, Michael and we discuss this in details and we talk about all the necessary procedures that needs to be taken. Hi everyone and welcome to Dubai Property Legal Guide, a series of videos I'm making answering the most common questions I'm receiving from my investors, landlords, tenants, and real estate brokers. Joining me today is Michael from my social media team. He gathered most of the questions and we will be discussing one of those questions in this episode. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Arash. So for today's episode, we're going to be talking about the grounds for eviction upon expiry of the lease term. Now, I'm going to ask you the super obvious question, which is, why is that even necessary? You would just assume that once the lease term is expired that you just wouldn't renew it. So why do you even need a law in place for this?
Yeah, it's so true because it automatically comes to the mind that it should be ended the moment the date is expired, but it doesn't work like that. As per the law, if the tenant continues living in the property upon the expiry, or if the tenant stays quiet, if the landlord stays quiet and doesn't object, this lease relationship will continue automatically with the same terms and conditions, unless if someone starts a procedure to stop this relationship. For stopping this relationship, we have different time frames that has to be respected in order to end it. That's the reason.
All right. Okay. Well, that does make sense. Now, I'm just going to bring this up on the screen here to read out everyone what we're actually dealing with, the law in question.
Yeah.
It says the landlord may demand eviction of a tenant upon expiry of the tenancy contract in some of the following cases. Now, this is Article 25(2) of the amendment to Law Number 26 of 2007,
Yes.
regulating the relationship between landlords and tenants in the Emirate of Dubai, as amended by Law Number 33 of 2008. Talk to me about some of those cases. When is this possible? When can that be done?
Okay. One of the first reason is if the landlord decides to demolish the property for reconstruction. The property is quite old, cannot be used in a proper way. The landlord decides to demolish it. In that case, the landlord has to send a legal notice to the tenant and request the eviction. Second reason could be that renovation or major maintenance is required. Don't forget, minor maintenance can still be done without ending the relationship. For example, if a part of the apartment needs to be repaired, they can do the repair while the tenant's still using the apartment. But there are major maintenance, full renovation that is required that the tenant cannot use the property anymore, and it will endanger the tenant. In that situation, the landlord will request the tenant to evict and then do the maintenance work on the property. Another reason that I can refer to is that the landlord decides to use the property themselves or to be used by the first of kin from the first degree only. In that situation, also, the landlord has the right for such eviction.
And who would that be in that immediate relationship? I'm assuming that's children, parents,
Yes.
brothers, sisters.
They're the landlord's son, daughter, children basically, or if they're using for themselves, it will be for the personal use. Then the last reason is that if the owner wishes to sell the property to a third party. In that situation, also the landlord will have the right for the eviction, provided that they send the proper legal notice to the tenant.
How long is that legal notice? How many days?
1 year, 12 months prior to the expiry.
Oh wow, 12 months. So that's difficult because some people they function on a 12-month contract anyway.
That's so true. So normally, if the owner has in mind to demolish the property, so they know that they have 1 year. So when they are signing with the tenant, they will explain to him that, hey, next year we're gonna demolish this property. We're gonna give you this notice. The paperwork will be done, and then they are secure that upon the expiry they can ask them to leave the property.
That makes sense. It makes sense now. That does sound easier said than done. But let's get into then the doing of that. Talk me through the process. Can the landlord do this themselves? Do they need to do they have to have a lawyer helping them to do the process? What is this? How does it work?
Yeah, in most situations, we ask them to at least consult with a lawyer to be aware exactly about the procedure and how to do it. Um, let's not forget that in most cases, the tenant will not agree with that reason, and they will stay in the property and will not leave the property as easy as we are thinking. So in that situation, landlord needs to go to the rental dispute center and file a case against the tenant and ask for such eviction. Obviously, for this procedure and this representation, a lawyer has to, or it's not a must, but it's better that a lawyer represents the landlord.
And I'm assuming that there must be a decent amount of cost in this process, and there's a bunch of documents that need to be put in place. What are those?
Documents, basically, they have to make sure of the tenants of the legal notice that has been drafted and served in a proper way, the way that the law has actually requested. And then tenancy contract, documentation that proves the ownership, etc. And then cost is the normal rental dispute center cost, which is 3.5% of the annual rent amount, and professional fees, etc.
So then, let's say, practically speaking, a tenant disagrees. A tenant is not happy with the decision.
Yes.
What can they do? What kind of avenues are there if they want to protect themselves?
Yes. In situation that a tenant is not happy with this instruction, they have the right to defend themselves or defend their claim in the same case, because landlord will go and file a case. So the tenant has the right to go and provide their own defense. So if they feel that, let me give you a clear example, a live example. If a tenant says that a landlord is asking me to leave the property because he wants to use it for his own views, then tenant has the right and go and say that this landlord already has multiple properties that he can use. So just by proving that, the landlord will not get to evict the tenant.
Interesting.
Because the landlord has to have a single property which is rented, and then he can ask to evict it so that he can use it himself.
That is very interesting.
So these are the small technicalities. People are not aware of it. And if they are getting the right consultation, we can help them. We can advise them on how to go about it.
Okay, and now that process, who are those key stakeholders? So you've mentioned a lawyer, you've mentioned the RDC, the Rental Dispute Committee. Like, who else is involved in that process?
There's no one else involved except if the judge decides to appoint an expert in the case, and then expert will be appointed and they will evaluate the situation and provide the court with their report. That's it. There's no other involvements, basically.
Okay, well, look, I mean, that all sounds pretty straightforward.
It's very straightforward, yes. As long as they practice exactly what the law has demanded, everything is very straightforward.
All right, well, that certainly cleared it up for me then. And being a renter, I know that I do at least have a long runway before I need to be worrying about anything like that. So that's covered our...
Get the right lawyer.
Absolutely. So that's covered all the bases, I think, for eviction upon expiry of the lease term. So back to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, for doing this. And thank you, everyone else, for watching this episode. I hope that you enjoyed and you found it useful. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email to arash@zodlaw.com. Check out my other social media platforms, and you can send me messages over there. Thank you for watching this, and I'm going to see you on the next episode.